Okay, let's drift off to sleep. Today you'll be listening and dozing off on a warm afternoon at Grandma and Grandpa's at Gull Harbor. Imagine for a second that you are lying down on a warm futon mattress at one end of a screened-in porch. The porch faces the harbor, the bay, and the ocean on the horizon. The mattress is nestled into a corner and is part of a cozy little reading nook prepared just for kids. There is a little bookshelf there full of comics, magazines, crosswords, and children's books. There are new books and worn-out books. The Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew, books about dinosaurs and horses and sea life, and all kinds of stories about kids getting into summer adventures together. A blue plastic and white transistor radio sits next to a stack of puzzles and board games. A wooden box contains decks of playing cards, dice, jacks, and short little pencils that have been sharpened way too many times. Now, while imagining laying here, let's get nice and relaxed. First, close your eyes and just become aware of your breathing, feeling your chest gently rise and fall again. Next, we will try taking a few deeper breaths. First, filling your lungs with air, then holding it in for 2 or 3 seconds before gently exhaling and letting it all go. Ready? Breathe in deeply, hold for 3, 2, 1, and then exhale. One more time. Breathe in deeply, hold for 3, 2, 1, and exhale. And try thinking to yourself, as I lay here at Gull Harbor, I can feel gravity's pull tugging me gently back towards Earth. With every exhale, I can feel my feet, my ankles, calves, knees, and my legs becoming heavier and more relaxed. Now you can feel the cool, salty ocean air on your skin. It would almost be too cold if it wasn't for the wonderful afternoon sun shining down on you perfectly. The sunlight splatters through the screens and bathes your tanned legs and arms with a soothing warmth, almost as if Grandma has wrapped you up like a cocoon in one of her quilted blankets. Inside the house, the TV is on, and you can hear Grandma and Grandpa moving around after lunch.
Dr. James Whitcomb Brawler. Brawler, huh? It rhymes with B-R-O-W-E-R. Why do you have that G-H in there? To make it difficult for quizmasters? Yes. Is that what
You know that they too will soon be taking their afternoon nap in their rooms. But you've got the whole porch to yourself, and your belly feels nice and warm and perfectly satisfied. Today, Grandma made clam chowder and grilled cheese sandwiches. You enjoyed the hot soup and warm, soft cheese, and then you washed it down with a glass of fresh, cold milk. Now, try taking a few more deep breaths. First, filling your lungs with air, holding it there briefly before gently exhaling and letting it all go. Ready? Breathe in deeply, hold for 3, 2, 1, and then exhale. Try continuing on your own, and while doing this, try thinking to yourself, as I lay here, I can feel my body becoming heavier in the cool air and warm sunshine. With each exhale, I can feel my hands and arms and my torso becoming heavier and heavier and more relaxed. You pull out a random book from the bookshelf. This one is called Summer Friends, and on the cover is a picture of a little girl in a red dress with white polka dots. She's sitting in grass with flowers all about, and she's shaking the paw of a bunny rabbit while a white duck looks on and a little frog jumps through the air. You decide that you're just too sleepy to read right now, so you set the book down and lay back and think about the day. It's no wonder you're sleepy and tired. In the morning, after breakfast, Grandma rubbed coconut-scented sunscreen on your face and arms, and then Grandpa took you with him in the old rusty truck to the hardware store. There he drank coffee and laughed with old bearded men wearing high rubber boots. Then you went with him to the docks at the harbor, where he showed you the best place to buy fresh clams, crab, and fish. The docks were bustling with activity. Wooden boats creaked against the tide, fishermen shouted to one another, and the air was thick with the scent of salt water, fresh fish, and diesel. As you continue to breathe deeply and then exhale, try thinking to yourself, as I lay here, my whole body feels heavy and relaxed. With every exhale, I can feel gravity pulling me back towards Earth gently. I can feel my head, my shoulders, my neck becoming relaxed and at ease. And my legs are heavy and at peace with gravity's pull. Now my whole body, my legs and feet, my arms and hands, my torso, my head and neck and shoulders, my whole body is completely at peace, relaxed, and at ease. In the late morning, after coming back to the house with Grandpa, you had borrowed his binoculars and walked up Whalebone Hill, where you could see everything far and wide. The little town of Gull Harbor, the fishing boats and ships at sea, the car ferry full of tourists headed to the islands, the seagulls, and kids riding bikes and scooters along the streets below. Then, up on Whalebone Hill, you had finally flown your brand new kite, a beautiful purple kite with a long white tail. It climbed higher and higher and higher through the coastal winds, tugging on your tired arms like a heavy fish on the end of the line. But now, so drowsy, laying under the sun on the porch, after a long morning of adventures in the crisp, fresh coastal air, you pick up the transistor radio and dial into a random station.
The Old Apple Dealer. From Mosses from an Old Manse by Nathaniel Hawthorne. The lover of the moral picturesque may sometimes
And then
find what he
you set the radio down, lay back, and close your eyes.
To be seized upon and represented to the imaginative vision by word painting. As an instance, I remember an old man who carries on a little trade of gingerbread and apples at the depot of one of our railroads. While awaiting the departure of the cars, my observation, flitting to and fro among the livelier characteristics of the scene, has often settled insensibly upon this almost hueless object. Thus, unconsciously to myself and unsuspected by him, I have studied the old apple dealer until he has become a naturalized citizen of my inner world. How little would he imagine, poor, neglected, friendless, unappreciated, and with little that demands appreciation, that the mental eye of an utter stranger has so often reverted to his figure. Many a noble form, many a beautiful face has flitted before me and vanished like a shadow. It is a strange witchcraft whereby this faded and featureless old apple dealer has gained a settlement in my memory. He's a small man with gray hair and gray stubble beard, and is invariably clad in a shabby surtout of snuff color, closely buttoned and half concealing a pair of gray pantaloons, the whole dress, though clean and entire, being evidently flimsy with much wear. His face, thin, withered, furrowed, and with features which even age has failed to render impressive, has a frost-bitten aspect. It is a moral frost which no physical warmth or comfortableness could counteract. The summer sunshine may fling its white heat upon him, or the good fire of the depot room may slake him, the focus of its blaze on a winter's day, but all in vain, for still the old roan looks as if he were in a frosty atmosphere, with scarcely warmth enough to keep life in the region about his heart. It is a patient, long-suffering, quiet, hopeless, shivering aspect. He is not desperate, that, though its etymology implies no more, would be too positive an expression, but merely devoid of hope, as all his past life probably offers no spots of brightness to his memory, so he takes his present poverty and discomfort as entirely a matter of course. He thinks it the definition of existence, so far as himself is concerned, to be poor, cold, and uncomfortable. It may be added that time has not thrown dignity as a mantle over the old man's figure. There is nothing venerable about him. You pity him without a scruple. He sits on a bench in the depot room, and before him, on the floor, are deposited 2 baskets of a capacity to contain his whole stock in trade. Across from one basket to the other extends a board on which is displayed a plate of cakes and gingerbread, some russet and red-cheeked apples, and a box containing variegated sticks of candy, together with that delectable condiment known by children as Gibraltar Rock, neatly done up in white paper. There is likewise a half-peck measure of cracked walnuts and 2 or 3 tin half-pints or gills filled with the nut kernels, ready for purchasers. Such are the small commodities with which our old friend comes daily before the world, ministering to its petty needs and little freaks of appetite, and seeking thence the solid subsistence, so far as he may subsist, of his life. A slight observer would speak of the old man's quietude, but on closer scrutiny, you discover that there is a continual unrest within him, which somewhat resembles the fluttering action of the nerves in a corpse from which life has recently departed. Though he never exhibits any violent action, and indeed might appear to be sitting quite still, yet you perceive, when his minuter peculiarities begin to be detected, that he is always making some little movement or other. He looks anxiously at his plate of cakes or pyramid of apples, and slightly alters their arrangement, with an evident idea that a great deal depends on their being disposed exactly thus and so. Then, for a moment, he gazes out of the window. Then he shivers quietly and folds his arms across his breast, as if to draw himself closer within himself, and thus keep a flicker of warmth in his lonesome heart. Now he turns again to his merchandise of cakes, apples, and candy, and discovers that this cake or that apple or yonder stick of red and white candy has somehow got out of its proper position. And is there not a walnut kernel too many or too few in one of those small tin measures? Again, the whole arrangement appears to be settled to his mind, but in the course of a minute or two, there will assuredly be something to set right. At times, by an indescribable shadow upon his features, too quiet, however, to be noticed until you are familiar with his ordinary aspect, the expression of frost-bitten, patient despondency becomes very touching. It seems as if just at that instant the suspicion occurred to him that in his chill decline of life, earning scanty bread by selling cakes, apples, and candy, he is a very miserable old fellow. But if he thinks so, it is a mistake. He can never suffer the extreme of misery because the tone of his whole being is too much subdued for him to feel anything acutely. Occasionally, one of the passengers, to while away a tedious interval, approaches the old man, inspects the articles upon his board, and even peeps curiously into the 2 baskets. Another, striding to and fro along the room, throws a look at the apples and gingerbread at every turn. A third, it may be of a more sensitive and delicate texture of being, glances shyly thitherward, cautious not to excite expectations of a purchaser, while yet undetermined whether to buy. But there appears to be no need of such a scrupulous regard to our old friend's feelings. True, he is conscious of the remote possibility to sell a cake or an apple, but innumerable disappointments have rendered him so far a philosopher that even if the purchased article should be returned, he will consider it altogether in the ordinary train of events. He speaks to none and makes no sign of offering his wares to the public. Not that he is deterred by pride, but by the certain conviction that such demonstrations would not increase his custom. Besides, this activity in business would require an energy that never could have been a characteristic of his almost passive disposition even in youth. Whenever an actual customer appears, the old man looks up with a patient eye. If the price and the article are approved, he is ready to make change. Otherwise his eyelids droop again, sadly enough, but with no heavier despondency than before. He shivers, perhaps folds his lean arms around his lean body, and resumes the lifelong, frozen patience in which consists his strength. Once in a while a schoolboy comes hastily up, places cent or two upon the board, and takes up a cake or stick of candy or a measure of walnuts or an apple as red-checked as himself. There are no words as to price, that being as well known to the buyer as to the seller. The old apple dealer never speaks an unnecessary word, not that he is sullen and morose, but there is none of the cheeriness and briskness in him that stirs up people to talk. Not seldom he is greeted by some old neighbor, a man well-to-do in the world who makes a civil, patronizing observation about the weather, and then, by way of performing a charitable deed, begins to chaffer for an apple. Our friend presumes not on any past acquaintance. He makes the briefest possible response to all general remarks, and shrinks quietly into himself again. After every diminution of his stock, he takes care to produce from the basket another cake, another stick of candy, another apple, or another measure of walnuts to supply the place of the articles sold. 2 or 3 attempts, or perchance half a dozen, are requisite before the board can be rearranged to his satisfaction. If he have received a silver coin, he waits till the purchaser is out of sight, then examines it closely and tries to bend it with his finger and thumb. Finally, he puts it into his waistcoat pocket with seemingly a gentle sigh. This sigh, so faint as to be hardly perceptible and not expressive of any definite emotion, is the accompaniment and conclusion of all his actions. It is the symbol of the chillness and torpid melancholy of his old age, which only make themselves felt sensibly when his repose is slightly disturbed. Our man of gingerbread and apples is not a specimen of the needy man who has seen better days. Doubtless there have been better and brighter days in the far-off time of his youth, but none with so much sunshine of prosperity in them that the chill, the depression, the narrowness of means in his declining years can have come upon him by surprise. His life has all been of a piece. His subdued and nerveless boyhood prefigured his abortive prime, which likewise contained within itself the prophecy and image of his lean and torpid age. He was perhaps a mechanic who never came to be a master in his craft, or a petty tradesman, rubbing onward between passably to-do and poverty. Possibly he may look back to some brilliant epoch of his career when there were $100 or $2 to his credit in the savings bank. Such must have been the extent of his better fortune, his little measure of this world's triumphs, all that he has known of success. A meek, downcast, humble, uncomplaining creature, he probably has never felt himself entitled to more than so much of the gifts of Providence. Is it not still something that he has never held out his hand for charity, nor has yet been driven to that sad home and household of earth's forlorn and broken-spirited children, the almshouse? He cherishes no quarrel, therefore, with his destiny, nor with the author of it. All is as it should be. If indeed he have been bereaved of a son, a bold, energetic, vigorous young man, on whom the father's feeble nature leaned as on a staff of strength, in that case he may have felt a bitterness that could not otherwise have been generated in his heart. But methinks the joy of possessing such a son, and the agony of losing him, would have developed the old man's moral and intellectual nature to a much greater degree than we now find it. Intense grief appears to be as much out of keeping with his life as fervid happiness. To confess the truth, it is not the easiest matter in the world to define and individualize a character like this, which we are now handling. The portrait must be so generally negative that the most delicate pencil is likely to spoil it by introducing some too positive tint. Every touch must be kept down, or else you destroy the subdued tone which is absolutely essential to the whole effect. Perhaps more may be done by contrast than by direct description. For this purpose I make use of another cake and candy merchant who, likewise, infests the railroad depot. This latter worthy is a very smart and well-dressed boy of 10 years old or thereabouts, who skips briskly hither and thither, addressing the passengers in a pert voice, yet with somewhat of good breeding in his tone and pronunciation. Now he has caught my eye and skips across the room with a pretty pertness, which I should like to correct with a box on the ear. "Any cake, sir? Any candy?" "No, none for me, my lad. I did but glance at your brisk figure in order to catch a reflected light and throw it upon your old rival yonder." Again, in order to invest my conception of the old man with a more decided sense of reality, I look at him in the very moment of intensest bustle on the arrival of the cars. The shriek of the engine as it rushes into the car house is the utterance of the steam fiend, whom man has subdued by magic spells and compels to serve as a beast of burden. He has skimmed rivers in his headlong rush, dashed through forests, plunged into the hearts of mountains, and glanced from the city to the desert place, and again to a far-off city, with a meteoric progress, seen and out of sight, while his reverberating roar still fills the ear. The travelers swarm forth from the cars. All are full of the momentum which they have caught from their mode of conveyance. It seems as if the whole world, both morally and physically, were detached from its old standfasts and set in rapid motion. And in the midst of this terrible activity, there sits the old man of gingerbread, so subdued, so hopeless, so without a stake in life, and yet not positively miserable. There he sits, the forlorn old creature, one chill and somber day after another, gathering scanty coppers for his cakes, apples, and candy. There sits the old apple dealer in his threadbare suit of snuff color and gray and his grisly stubble herd. See, he folds his lean arms around his lean figure with that quiet sigh and that scarcely perceptible shiver which are the tokens of his inward state. I have him now. He and the steam fiend are each other's antipodes. The latter is the type of all that go ahead, and the old man the representative of that melancholy class who by some sad witchcraft are doomed never to share in the world's exulting progress. Thus the contrast between mankind and this desolate brother becomes picturesque and even sublime. And now, farewell, old friend. Little do you suspect that a student of human life has made your character the theme of more than one solitary and thoughtful hour. Many would say that you have hardly individuality enough to be the object of your own self-love. How then can a stranger's eye detect anything in your mind and heart to study and to wonder at? Yet, could I read but a tithe of what is written there, it would be a volume of deeper and more comprehensive import than all that the wisest mortals have given to the world. For the soundless depths of the human soul and of eternity have an opening through your breast. God be praised, were it only for your sake that the present shapes of human existence are not cast in iron or hewn in everlasting adamant, but molded of the vapors that vanish away, while the essence flits upward to the infinite. There is a spiritual essence in this gray and lean old shape that shall flit upward too, yes, doubtless there is a region where the lifelong shiver will pass away from his being, and that quiet sigh which it has taken him so many years to breathe will be brought to a close for good and all. The Snow Image, a Childish Miracle. From Twice Told Tales by Nathaniel Hawthorne. One afternoon of a cold winter's day, when the sun shone forth with chilly brightness after a long storm, 2 children asked leave of their mother to run out and play in the new-fallen snow. The elder child was a little girl, whom, because she was of a tender and modest disposition, and was thought to be very beautiful, her parents and other people who were familiar with her used to call Violet. But her brother was known by the style and title of Peony, on account of the ruddiness of his broad and round little phiz, which made everybody think of sunshine and great scarlet flowers. The father of these 2 children, a certain Mr. Lindsay, it is important to say, was an excellent but exceedingly matter-of-fact sort of man, a dealer in hardware, and was sturdily accustomed to take what is called the common-sense view of all matters that came under his consideration. With a heart about as tender as other people's, he had a head as hard and impenetrable, and therefore perhaps as empty, as one of the iron pots which it was a part of his business to sell. The mother's character, on the other hand, had a strain of poetry in it, a trait of unworldly beauty, a delicate and dewy flower, as it were, that had survived out of her imaginative youth and still kept itself alive amid the dusty realities of matrimony and motherhood. So, Violet and Peony, as I began with saying, besought their mother to let them run out and play in the new snow. For though it had looked so dreary and dismal, drifting downward out of the gray sky, it had a very cheerful aspect, now that the sun was shining on it. The children dwelt in a city, and had no wider play place than a little garden before the house, divided by a white fence from the street, and with a pear tree and 2 or 3 plum trees overshadowing it, and some rose bushes just in front of the parlor windows. The trees and shrubs, however, were now leafless, and their twigs were enveloped in the light snow, which thus made a kind of wintry foliage, with here and there a pendant icicle for the fruit. "Yes, Violet, yes, my little Peony," said their kind mother. "You may go out and play in the new snow." Accordingly, the good lady bundled up her darlings in woolen jackets and wadded sacks, and put comforters round their necks, and a pair of striped gaiters on each little pair of legs, and worsted mittens on their hands, and gave them a kiss apiece, by way of a spell to keep away Jack Frost. Forth sallied the 2 children, with a hop, skip, and jump that carried them at once into the very heart of a huge snowdrift, whence Violet emerged like a snow bunting, while little Peony floundered out with his round face in full bloom. Then what a merry time had they! To look at them, frolicking in the wintry garden, you would have thought that the dark and pitiless storm had been sent for no other purpose but to provide a new plaything for Violet and Peony, and that they themselves had been created, as the snowbirds were, to take delight only in the tempest and in the white mantle which it spread over the earth. At last, when they had frosted one another all over with handfuls of snow, Violet, after laughing heartily at little Peony's figure, was struck with a new idea. "You look exactly like a snow image, Peony," said she, "if your cheeks were not so red, and that puts me in mind. Let us make an image out of snow, an image of a little girl, and it shall be our sister, and shall run about and play with us all winter long. Won't it be nice?" "Oh, yes," cried Peony, as plainly as he could speak, for he was but a little boy. "That will be nice, and Mamma shall see it." "Yes," answered Violet, Mama shall see the new little girl, but she must not make her come into the warm parlor, for you know, our little snow sister will not love the warmth." And forthwith the children began this great business of making a snow image that should run about, while their mother, who was sitting at the window and overheard some of their talk, could not help smiling at the gravity with which they set about it. They really seemed to imagine that there would be no difficulty whatever in creating a live little girl out of the snow. And, to say the truth, if miracles are ever to be wrought, it will be by putting our hands to the work in precisely such a simple and undoubting frame of mind as that in which Violet and Peony now undertook to perform one, without so much as knowing that it was a miracle. So thought the mother, and thought likewise that the new snow, just fallen from heaven, would be excellent material to make new beings of, if it were not so very cold. She gazed at the children a moment longer, delighting to watch their little figures, the girl, tall for her age, graceful and agile, and so delicately colored that she looked like a cheerful thought more than a physical reality, while Peony expanded in breadth rather than height, and rolled along on his short and sturdy legs, as substantial as an elephant, though not quite so big. Then the mother resumed her work. What it was I forget, but she was either trimming a silken bonnet for Violet or darning a pair of stockings for little Peony's short legs. Again, however, and again, and yet other agains, she could not help turning her head to the window to see how the children got on with their snow image. Indeed, it was an exceedingly pleasant sight, those bright little souls at their task. Moreover, it was really wonderful to observe how knowingly and skillfully they managed the matter. Violet assumed the chief direction and told Peony what to do, while with her own delicate fingers she shaped out all the nicer parts of the snow figure. It seemed, in fact, not so much to be made by the children as to grow up under their hands while they were playing and prattling about it. Their mother was quite surprised at this, and the longer she looked, the more and more surprised she grew. "What remarkable children mine are," thought she, smiling with a mother's pride, and smiling at herself too for being so proud of them. What other children could have made anything so like a little girl's figure out of snow at the first trial? Well, but now I must finish Peony's new frock, for his grandfather is coming tomorrow, and I want the little fellow to look handsome. So she took up the frock and was soon as busily at work again with her needle as the two children with their snow image. But still, as the needle traveled hither and thither through the seams of the dress, the mother made her toil light and happy by listening to the airy voices of Violet and Peony. They kept talking to one another all the time, their tongues being quite as active as their feet and hands. Except at intervals she could not distinctly hear what was said, but had merely a sweet impression that they were in a most loving mood, and were enjoying themselves highly, and that the business of making the snow image went prosperously on. Now and then, however, when Violet and Peony happened to raise their voices, the words were as audible as if they had been spoken in the very parlor where the mother sat. Oh, how delightfully those words echoed in her heart, even though they meant nothing so very wise or wonderful after all. But you must know, a mother listens with her heart much more than with her ears, and thus she is often delighted with the trills of celestial music when other people can hear nothing of the kind. "Peony, Peony," cried Violet to her brother, who had gone to another part of the garden. "Bring me some of that fresh snow, Peony, from the very farthest corner where we have not been trampling. I want it to shape our little snow sister's bosom with. You know that part must be quite pure, just as it came out of the sky." "Here it is, Violet," answered Peony in his bluff tone, but a very sweet tone too, as he came floundering through the half-trodden drifts. "Here is the snow for her little bosom. Oh, Violet, how beautiful she begins to look." Yes, said Violet thoughtfully and quietly. "Our snow sister does look very lovely. I did not quite know, Peony, that we could make such a sweet little girl as this." The mother, as she listened, thought how fit and delightful an incident it would be if fairies, or still better, if angel children were to come from paradise and play invisibly with her own darlings and help them to make their snow image, giving it the features of celestial babyhood. Violet and Peony would not be aware of their immortal playmates, only they would see that the image grew very beautiful while they worked at it, and would think that they themselves had done it all. "My little girl and boy deserve such playmates if mortal children ever did," said the mother to herself, and then she smiled again at her own motherly pride. Nevertheless, the idea seized upon her imagination, and ever and anon she took a glimpse out of the window, half dreaming that she might see the golden-haired children of paradise sporting with her own golden-haired Violet and bright-cheeked Peony. Now, for a few moments, there was a busy and earnest but indistinct hum of the two children's voices as Violet and Peony wrought together with one happy consent. Violet still seemed to be the guiding spirit, while Peony acted rather as a laborer and brought her the snow from far and near. And yet the little urchin evidently had a proper understanding of the matter too. "Peony, Peony," cried Violet, for her brother was again at the other side of the garden. "Bring me those light wreaths of snow that have rested on the lower branches of the pear tree. You can clamber on the snowdrift, Peony, and reach them easily. I must have them to make some ringlets for our snow sister's head." "Here they are, Violet," answered the little boy. "Take care you do not break them. Well done, well done. How pretty." "Does she not look sweetly?" said Violet with a very satisfied tone. "And now we must have some little shining bits of ice to make the brightness of her eyes. She is not finished yet. Mamma will see how very beautiful she is, but Papa will say, 'Tush, nonsense, come in out of the cold.'" "Let us call Mamma to look out," said Peony, and then he shouted lustily, "Mamma, Mamma, Mamma, look out and see what a nice little girl we are making." The mother put down her work for an instant and looked out of the window, but it so happened that the sun, for this was one of the shortest days of the whole year, had sunken so nearly to the edge of the world that his setting shine came obliquely into the lady's eyes. So she was dazzled, you must understand, and could not very distinctly observe what was in the garden. Still, however, through all that bright, blinding dazzle of the sun and the new snow, she beheld a small white figure in the garden that seemed to have a wonderful deal of human likeness about it, and she saw Violet and Peony. Indeed, she looked more at them than at the image. She saw the two children still at work, Peony bringing fresh snow, and Violet applying it to the figure as scientifically as a sculptor adds clay to his model. Indistinctly as she discerned the snow child, the mother thought to herself that never before was there a snow figure so cunningly made, nor ever such a dear little girl and boy to make it. "They do everything better than other children," said she very complacently. "No wonder they make better snow images." She sat down again to her work and made as much haste with it as possible, because twilight would soon come, and Peony's frock was not yet finished, and Grandfather was expected by railroad pretty early in the morning. Faster and faster, therefore, went her flying fingers. The children likewise kept busily at work in the garden, and still the mother listened whenever she could catch a word. She was amused to observe how their little imaginations had got mixed up with what they were doing and carried away by it. They seemed positively to think that the snow child would run about and play with them. "What a nice playmate she will be for us all winter long," said Violet. "I hope Papa will not be afraid of her giving us a cold." Shan't you love her dearly, Peony?" "Oh, yes," cried Peony, "and I will hug her, and she shall sit down close by me and drink some of my warm milk." "Oh, no, Peony," answered Violet with grave wisdom. "That will not do at all. Warm milk will not be wholesome for our little snow sister. Little snow people like her eat nothing but icicles. No, no, Peony, we must not give her anything warm to drink." There was a minute or two of silence, for Peony, whose short legs were never weary, had gone on a pilgrimage again to the other side of the garden. All of a sudden, Violet cried out loudly and joyfully, "Look here, Peony, come quickly. A light has been shining on her cheek out of that rose-colored cloud, and the color does not go away. Is not that beautiful?" "Yes, it is beautiful," answered Peony, pronouncing the 3 syllables with deliberate accuracy. "Oh, Violet, only look at her hair. It is all like gold." "Oh, certainly," said Violet with tranquility, as if it were very much a matter of course. "That color, you know, comes from the golden clouds that we see up there in the sky. She is almost finished now, but her lips must be made very red. Redder than her cheeks. Perhaps, Peony, it will make them red if we both kiss them." Accordingly, the mother heard 2 smart little smacks, as if both her children were kissing the snow image on its frozen mouth. But, as this did not seem to make the lips quite red enough, Violet next proposed that the snow child should be invited to kiss Peony's scarlet cheek. "Come, little snow sister, kiss me," cried Peony. "There, she has kissed you," added Violet, "and now her lips are very red, and she blushed a little too." "Oh, what a cold kiss!" cried Peony. Just then there came a breeze of the pure west wind, sweeping through the garden and rattling the parlor windows. It sounded so wintry cold that the mother was about to tap on the window pane with her thimbled finger to summon the 2 children in, when they both cried out to her with one voice. The tone was not a tone of surprise, although they were evidently a good deal excited. It appeared rather as if they were very much rejoiced at some event that had now happened, but which they had been looking for and had reckoned upon all along. "Mamma, Mamma, we have finished our little snow sister, and she is running about the garden with us." "What imaginative little beings my children are," thought the mother, putting the last few stitches into Peony's frock. "And it is strange, too, that they make me almost as much a child as they themselves are. I can hardly help believing, now, that the snow image has really come to life." "Dear Mamma," cried Violet, "pray look out and see what a sweet playmate we have." The mother, being thus entreated, could no longer delay to look forth from the window. The sun was now gone out of the sky, leaving, however, a rich inheritance of his brightness among those purple and golden clouds which make the sunsets of winter so magnificent. But there was not the slightest gleam or dazzle either on the window or on the snow, so that the good lady could look all over the garden and see everything and everybody in it. And what do you think she saw there? Violet and Peony, of course, her own 2 darling children. Ah, but whom or what did she see besides? Why, if you will believe me, there was a small figure of a girl, dressed all in white, with rose-tinged cheeks and ringlets of golden hue, playing about the garden with the 2 children. A stranger though she was, the child seemed to be on as familiar terms with Violet and Peony, and they with her, as if all the 3 had been playmates during the whole of their little lives. The mother thought to herself that it must certainly be the daughter of one of the neighbors, and that, seeing Violet and Peony in the garden, the child had run across the street to play with them. So this kind lady went to the door, intending to invite the little runaway into her comfortable parlor. For now that the sunshine was withdrawn, the atmosphere out of doors was already growing very cold. But after opening the house door, she stood an instant on the threshold, hesitating whether she ought to ask the child to come in, or whether she should even speak to her. Indeed, she almost doubted whether it were a real child after all, or only a light wreath of the new-fallen snow, blown hither and thither about the garden by the intensely cold west wind. There was certainly something very singular in the aspect of the little stranger. Among all the children of the neighborhood, the lady could remember no such face, with its pure white and delicate rose color, and the golden ringlets tossing about the forehead and cheeks. And as for her dress, which was entirely of white and fluttering in the breeze, it was such as no reasonable woman would put upon a little girl when sending her out to play in the depth of winter. It made this kind and careful mother shiver only to look at those small feet, with nothing in the world on them except a very thin pair of white slippers. Nevertheless, airily as she was clad, the child seemed to feel not the slightest inconvenience from the cold, but danced so lightly over the snow that the tips of her toes left hardly a print in its surface, while Violet could but just keep pace with her, and Peony's short legs compelled him to lag behind. Once, in the course of their play, the strange child placed herself between Violet and Peony, and taking a hand of each, skipped merrily forward, and they along with her. Almost immediately, however, Peony pulled away his little fist and began to rub it as if the fingers were tingling with cold, while Violet also released herself, though with less abruptness, gravely remarking that it was better not to take hold of hands. The white-robed damsel said not a word, but danced about just as merrily as before. If Violet and Peony did not choose to play with her, she could make just as good a playmate of the brisk and cold west wind, which kept blowing her all about the garden, and took such liberties with her that they seemed to have been friends for a long time. All this while the mother stood on the threshold, wondering how a little girl could look so much like a flying snowdrift, or how a snowdrift could look so very like a little girl. She called Violet and whispered to her. "Violet, my darling, what is this child's name?" asked she. "Does she live near us?" "Why, dearest mamma," answered Violet, laughing to think that her mother did not comprehend so very plain an affair. "This is our little snow sister, whom we have just been making." "Yes, dear mamma," cried Peony, running to his mother and looking up simply into her face. "This is our snow image. Is it not a nice little child?" At this instant a flock of snowbirds came flitting through the air. As was very natural, they avoided Violet and Peony, but, and this looked strange, they flew at once to the white-robed child, fluttered eagerly about her head, alighted on her shoulders, and seemed to claim her as an old acquaintance. She, on her part, was evidently as glad to see these little birds, old Winter's grandchildren, as they were to see her, and welcomed them by holding out both her hands. Hereupon they each and all tried to alight on her 2 palms and 10 small fingers and thumbs, crowding one another off with an immense fluttering of their tiny wings. One dear little bird nestled tenderly in her bosom. Another put its bill to her lips. They were as joyous all the while, and seemed as much in their element as you may have seen them when sporting with a snowstorm. Violet and Peony stood laughing at this pretty sight, for they enjoyed the merry time which their new playmate was having with these small winged visitants, almost as much as if they themselves took part in it. "Violet," said her mother, greatly perplexed, "tell me the truth, without any jest. Who is this little girl?" "My darling mamma," answered Violet, looking seriously into her mother's face, and apparently surprised that she should need any further explanation. "I have told you truly who she is. It is our little snow image, which Peony and I have been making. Peony will tell you so, as well as I. Yes, Mamma, asseverated Peony, with much gravity in his crimson little phiz. This is Ziddle's snow child. Is not she a nice one? But Mamma, her hand is, oh, so very cold. While Mamma still hesitated what to think and what to do, the street gate was thrown open, and the father of Violet and Peony appeared, wrapped in a pilot cloth sack, with a fur cap drawn down over his ears, and the thickest of gloves upon his hands. Mr. Lindsay was a middle-aged man with a weary and yet a happy look in his wind-flushed and frost-pinched face, as if he had been busy all the day long and was glad to get back to his quiet home. His eyes brightened at the sight of his wife and children, although he could not help uttering a word or two of surprise at finding the whole family in the open air on so bleak a day, and after sunset, too. He soon perceived the little white stranger sporting to and fro in the garden, like a dancing snow wreath, and the flock of snowbirds fluttering about her head. "Pray, what little girl may that be?" inquired this very sensible man. "Surely her mother must be crazy to let her go out in such bitter weather as it has been today, with only that flimsy white gown and those thin slippers." "My dear husband," said his wife, "I know no more about the little thing than you do. Some neighbor's child, I suppose. Our Violet and Peony," she added, laughing at herself for repeating so absurd a story, "insist that she is nothing but a snow image, which they have been busy about in the garden almost all the afternoon." As she said this, the mother glanced her eyes toward the spot where the children's snow image had been made. What was her surprise on perceiving that there was not the slightest trace of so much labor, no image at all, no piled-up heap of snow, nothing whatever save the prints of little footsteps around a vacant space. "This is very strange," said she. "What is strange, dear mother?" asked Violet. "Dear father, do not you see how it is? This is our snow image which Peony and I have made, because we wanted another playmate, did not we, Peony?" "Yes, Papa," said Crimson Peony. "This be our little snow sister. Is she not beautiful? But she gave me such a cold kiss." "Oh, nonsense, children," cried their good, honest father, who, as we have already intimated, had an exceedingly common, sensible way of looking at matters. "Do not tell me of making live figures out of snow. Come, wife, this little stranger must not stay out in the bleak air a moment longer. We will bring her into the parlor, and you shall give her a supper of warm bread and milk, and make her as comfortable as you can. Meanwhile, I will inquire among the neighbors, or if necessary, send the city crier about the streets to give notice of a lost child." So saying, this honest and very kind-hearted man was going toward the little white damsel with the best intentions in the world. But Violet and Peony, each seizing their father by the hand, earnestly besought him not to make her come in. "Dear father," cried Violet, putting herself before him, "it is true what I have been telling you. This is our little snow girl, and she cannot live any longer than while she breathes the cold west wind. Do not make her come into the hot room." "Yes, father," shouted Peony, stamping his little foot, so mightily was he in earnest. "This be nothing but our little snow child. She will not love the hot fire." "Nonsense, children, nonsense, nonsense," cried the father, half vexed, half laughing at what he considered their foolish obstinacy. "Run into the house this moment. It is too late to play any longer now. I must take care of this little girl immediately, or she will catch her death a cold." "Husband, dear husband," said his wife in a low voice, for she had been looking narrowly at the snow child and was more perplexed than ever, "there is something very singular in all this. You will think me foolish, but may it not be that some invisible angel has been attracted by the simplicity and good faith with which our children set about their undertaking? May he not have spent an hour of his immortality in playing with those dear little souls? And so the result is what we call a miracle. No, no, do not laugh at me. I see what a foolish thought it is. My dear wife, replied the husband, laughing heartily, you are as much a child as Violet and Peony. And in one sense so she was, for all through life she had kept her heart full of childlike simplicity and faith, which was as pure and clear as crystal, and looking at all matters through this transparent medium, she sometimes saw truths so profound that other people laughed at them as nonsense and absurdity. But now, kind Mr. Lindsay had entered the garden, breaking away from his 2 children who still sent their shrill voices after him, beseeching him to let the snow child stay and enjoy herself in the cold west wind. As he approached, the snowbirds took to flight. The little white damsel also fled backward, shaking her head as if to say, "Pray do not touch me," and roguishly, as it appeared, leading him through the deepest of the snow. Once the good man stumbled and floundered down upon his face, so that, gathering himself up again with the snow sticking to his rough pilot-cloth sack, he looked as white and wintry as the snow image of the largest size. Some of the neighbors, meanwhile, seeing him from their windows, wondered what could possess poor Mr. Lindsay to be running about his garden in pursuit of a snowdrift, which the west wind was driving hither and thither. At length, after a vast deal of trouble, he chased the little stranger into a corner where she could not possibly escape him. His wife had been looking on, and, it being nearly twilight, was wonderstruck to observe how the snow child gleamed and sparkled, and how she seemed to shed a glow all round about her, and when driven into the corner, she positively glistened like a star. It was a frosty kind of brightness, too, like that of an icicle in the moonlight. The wife thought it strange that good Mr. Lindsay should see nothing remarkable in the snow child's appearance. "Come, you odd little thing," cried the honest man, seizing her by the hand. "I have caught you at last, and will make you comfortable in spite of yourself. We will put a nice warm pair of worsted stockings on your frozen little feet, and you shall have a good thick shawl to wrap yourself in. Your poor white nose, I am afraid, is actually frostbitten. But we will make it all right. Come along in." And so, with a most benevolent smile on his sagacious visage, all purple as it was with the cold, this very well-meaning gentleman took the snow child by the hand and led her towards the house. She followed him, droopingly and reluctant, for all the glow and sparkle was gone out of her figure, and whereas just before she had resembled a bright, frosty, star-gemmed evening with a crimson gleam on the cold horizon, she now looked as dull and languid as a thaw. As kind Mr. Lindsay led her up the steps of the door, Violet and Peony looked into his face, their eyes full of tears, which froze before they could run down their cheeks, and again entreated him not to bring their snow image into the house. "Not bring her in!" exclaimed the kind-hearted man. "Why, you are crazy, my little Violet, quite crazy, my small Peony. She is so cold already that her hand has almost frozen mine in spite of my thick gloves. Would you have her freeze to death?" His wife, as he came up the steps, had been taking another long, earnest, almost awe-stricken gaze at the little white stranger. She hardly knew whether it was a dream or no, but she could not help fancying that she saw the delicate print of Violet's fingers on the child's neck. It looked just as if, while Violet was shaping out the image, she had given it a gentle pat with her hand and had neglected to smooth the impression quite away. "After all, husband," said the mother, recurring to her idea that the angels would be as much delighted to play with Violet and Peony as she herself was, After all, she does look strangely like a snow image. I do believe she's made of snow." A puff of the west wind blew against the snow child, and again she sparkled like a star. "Snow," repeated good Mr. Lindsay, drawing the reluctant guest over his hospitable threshold. "No wonder she looks like snow. She is half frozen, poor little thing. But a good fire will put everything to rights." Without further talk, and always with the same best intentions, this highly benevolent and common-sensible individual led the little white damsel, drooping, more and more out of the frosty air and into his comfortable parlor. A Heidenberg stove, filled to the brim with intensely burning anthracite, was sending a bright gleam through the isinglass of its iron door, and causing the vase of water on its top to fume and bubble with excitement. A warm, sultry smell was diffused throughout the room. A thermometer on the wall farthest from the stove stood at 80 degrees. The parlor was hung with red curtains and covered with a red carpet, and looked just as warm as it felt. The difference betwixt the atmosphere here and the cold, wintry twilight out of doors was like stepping at once from Nova Zembla to the hottest part of India, or from the North Pole into an oven. Oh, this was a fine place for the little white stranger. The common, sensible man placed the snow child on the hearth rug, right in front of the hissing and fuming stove. "Now she will be comfortable," cried Mr. Lindsay, rubbing his hands and looking about him with the pleasantest smile you ever saw. "Make yourself at home, my child." Sad, and drooping looked the little white maiden as she stood on the hearth rug with the hot blast of the stove striking through her like a pestilence. Once she threw a glance wistfully toward the windows and caught a glimpse through its red curtains of the snow-covered roofs and the stars glimmering frostily, and all the delicious intensity of the cold night. The bleak wind rattled the window panes, as if it were summoning her to come forth. But there stood the snow child, drooping before the hot stove. But the common, sensible man saw nothing amiss. "Come, wife," said he, "let her have a pair of thick stockings and a woolen shawl or blanket directly, and tell Dora to give her some warm supper as soon as the milk boils. You, Violet and Peony, amuse your little friend. She is out of spirits, you see, at finding herself in a strange place. For my part, I will go around among the neighbors and find out where she belongs." The mother, meanwhile, had gone in search of the shawl and stockings, for her own view of the matter, however subtle and delicate, had given way, as it always did, to the stubborn materialism of her husband. Without heeding the remonstrances of his two children, who still kept murmuring that their little snow sister did not love the warmth, good Mr. Lindsay took his departure, shutting the parlor door carefully behind him. Turning up the collar of his sack over his ears, he emerged from the house and had barely reached the street gate when he was recalled by the screams of Violet and Peony and the rapping of a thimbled finger against the parlor window. "Husband, husband," cried his wife, showing her horror-stricken face through the window panes. "There is no need of going for the child's parents." "We told you so, father," screamed Violet and Peony as he re-entered the parlor. "You would bring her in, and now our poor, dear, beautiful little snow sister is thawed." And their own sweet little faces were already dissolved in tears, so that their father, seeing what strange things occasionally happen in this everyday world, felt not a little anxious lest his children might be going to thaw too. In the utmost perplexity, he demanded an explanation of his wife. She could only reply that, being summoned to the parlor by the cries of Violet and Peony, she found no trace of the little white maiden, unless it were the remains of a heap of snow which, while she was gazing at it, melted quite away upon the hearth rug. "And there you see all that is left of it," added she, pointing to a pool of water in front of the stove. "Yes, Father," said Violet, looking reproachfully at him through her tears. "There is all that is left of our dear little snow sister." "Naughty Father!" cried Peony, stamping his foot, and I shudder to say, shaking his little fist at the common sensible man. "We told you how it would be. What for did you bring her in?" And the Heidenberg stove, through the isinglass of its door, seemed to glare at good Mr. Lindsay like a red-eyed demon, triumphing in the mischief which it had done. This, you will observe, was one of those rare cases which yet will occasionally happen, where common sense finds itself at fault. The remarkable story of the snow image, though to that sagacious class of people to whom good Mr. Lindsay belongs, it may seem but a childish affair, is, nevertheless, capable of being moralized in various methods, greatly for their edification. One of its lessons, for instance, might be that it behooves men, and especially men of benevolence, to consider well what they are about, and, before acting on their philanthropic purposes, to be quite sure that they comprehend the nature and all the relations of the business in hand. What has been established as an element of good to one being may prove absolute mischief to another, even as the warmth of the parlor was proper enough for children of flesh and blood, like Violet and Peony, though by no means very wholesome, even for them, but involved nothing short of annihilation to the unfortunate snow image. But after all, there is no teaching anything to wise men of good Mr. Lindsay's stamp. They know everything, oh, to be sure, everything that has been, and everything that is, and everything that, by any future possibility, can be. And should some phenomenon of nature or providence transcend their system, they will not recognize it, even if it come to pass under their very noses. "Wife," said Mr. Lindsay, after a fit of silence, "see what a quantity of snow the children have brought in on their feet. It has made quite a puddle here before the stove. Pray tell Dora to bring some towels and mop it up."